Hello, hello. Welcome, everyone. I'm Cynthia. We're going to get started in a little bit. Tom's ready to go.
I am ready to go.
You're ready to go. I know we have some people joining and we're live on LinkedIn, which is great. Welcome, everyone. We're happy to be here.
While we wait, why don't we have everyone just type in the chat window where they're calling
Wonderful.
in from? We always love to see which part of the world you are from. So if you do that right now, that would be fun to see.
Yeah, let's see those chats. Tom, I know where you're at.
Yes, you do.
London, Ontario.
And I guess the other London is
London,
the London, UK.
UK.
Yeah. I've actually been to London, Ontario, and I'll be in London, UK next week. So that's exciting.
Yeah, you will most definitely be there. Scotland,
Scotland.
welcome everyone. Well, we're so glad you're here. And I know we're just waiting just for a little bit. Northern Virginia, welcome. And I can share with you now, feel free to engage on the chat. We want this webinar to be engaging and have your questions collected in the chat, and or you can also, if there's a side chat that happens, you can learn even more.
All right. If you haven't put in where you're calling in from, go ahead and do that. If you just joined us here in the last minute, I'd love to see that.
Just to be fair for everyone, Tom is just a few street. I feel like you're just a few streets away from me, Tom, which
As the
is,
bird flies, it might be what, 2 miles or
yeah, which is very uncommon in today's reality of working remote or if you're hybrid, right?
hmm.
uh, Welcome from Pittsburgh. We have quite the geography today.
Denver. All right. I love Colorado.
Hmm.
Well, why don't we go ahead and get started, Cynthia?
Okay, let's do it. Just to introduce myself, I am Cynthia Petti. I'm the COO at Productside. I happen to be located in Austin, Texas, which is not too far from Tom. And I'm happy to be here as a co-facilitator and hearing the questions that all of you have, and also just facilitate more learning as we can all grow together. And with that, I want to hand it off to Tom.
Yes, Tom Evans, as Cynthia already said, is also from Austin, Texas, and just a couple miles apart from each other. But I've been with Productside for 15 years, working as a trainer and consultant, and have had the opportunity to work with companies from around the world and across many different industries. So I'm always excited to engage with the product management community. So appreciate you being here.
Thanks, Tom. And to Tom's point, I think, Tom, you and I have had a long run together as colleagues. So, and this happens to be, by the way, the first webinar that we are in together ever.
That's
So,
true. Yep.
regardless of however long you've been at a company, there is always something new to learn and try, which is, I think, what many product managers are doing on a daily, weekly, or however long basis. So, one is welcome. I want to say welcome everyone at Productside. We know the challenge, right? That in creating products for people and having people fall in love with these products, whether it's from aligning the stakeholders, talking to your customers, achieving those needs, the never ending backlogs. You're in the trenches. We know those struggles and we're in those trenches with you because we've lived them. To Tom's point, he's worked with many clients. He understands the pain points, and we're there as your proven product partner. So it's not only a framework that we have and we share and our knowledge, we know those challenges. So we're here to complete solutions for transformation. The transformation is forever going. We're going to be talking about PLG, and I know it's something most of us hear about. It's a word. And now it's like, Tom, you're going to tell it to us from the perspective of AI.
Hmm.
So this is great. We have tailored expertise. So we go into organizations and we understand the uniqueness and we get those solutions to reflect what is needed. Invested experts, again, we understand the vocabulary, the pain points, and we are fully committed to your success. So with that, we can dive into what we're going to do today. First of all, thank you for everyone that mentioned where you're at. We want you to utilize the webinar chat function to ask questions, keep them coming because we want this to be interactive. Yes, the recording is recorded. So if you have to drop off, go do something else, don't worry about it. You will have this recording delivered to you and you can access it whenever you'd like.
Yeah, and I'll just add, we love to, don't wait till the end to ask your questions. And so if you have questions, we have a Q&A function, and that's where we track the questions. If you want to have conversation with the other participants, use the chat for that. But definitely, if you have questions, please ask those anywhere along as we go through them. And Cynthia will be monitoring those and looking for the right timing to respond back to those.
Yes, thank you. And it's also use it as community, right? Everyone is here from different parts of the world, which is why we love to keep in touch, which is connect with us on LinkedIn. We're posting and sharing best practices, things that we're hearing out in the field. So it's a great opportunity to hear what is going on in product management, but also connect peer to peer, because regardless of where we're at in the world, we are all connected, thankfully, online. And then secondarily, our newsletter. It's a really great weekly newsletter that goes out to you. It's our Productside Pulse. It's a quick read. There's great information. And sometimes you get some content to download before anyone else gets to do that. So be the first to look at those tools and tips by connecting with us on LinkedIn and joining our newsletter.
And you also might get hear about some of our special offers and training classes before anyone else gets access to those. So it's a great way to keep in touch with us.
That is true.
All right, I guess I'll pick up from here. So today we're going to talk about product-led growth. And so we're not going to really start with, I'm going to start with just a bit of the fundamentals of product-led growth, but I'm going into this webinar assuming that many of us at least have a first level of familiarity with the concepts of product-led growth. I'm going to talk to you how product-led growth has changed over the years, looking back from 5 years ago until now, especially. And then we're going to get into some of the key trends that we're seeing in the world of product-led growth. And no surprise, one of those is AI. And so we'll talk about how companies are starting to use AI as part of driving their product-led growth. Another trend is around the communities. So getting greater community involvement is one of those. And then the last thing we're going to talk about is having that mindset of let's implement product-led growth from the very beginning. So let's not have it be an afterthought. Let's be thinking about that as part of our go-to-market strategy from the very beginning. So let's look at product-led growth. And first of all, I want to just talk to it from an introductory point of view. And so this is a go-to-market strategy where your process of sales and marketing is really driven more from the product itself, from the user experience, and from helping your target customers recognize the value and achieve that value very quickly. And then we start turning into how do we, monetize this? How do we start growing the usage of our product with current users and expanding, especially if we're B2B, how do we expand into other parts of the organization? And so you're going to see a theme here where we're talking about the acquisition, the activation, retention, and expansion. And, even as important on that is that referral. How do we create a, viral loop if we can, leveraging product-led growth? Now, I'm expecting all of us, whether we are implementing product-led growth in our product or not, have experienced product-led growth because I am sure every single one of us have downloaded an app or we've signed up for an online type app where initially we got some access to it for free. And then as we experienced the value of it, we started being offered opportunities to upgrade to paid type levels. And that's exactly what product-led growth is getting, instead of driving us there through just sales and marketing, is really letting us experience the product. And so if you think about the old acquisition model, I used to have to go through a marketing and sales process and I have to pay something. And now I finally get to see the product. In product led growth, we are letting you experience the product first and seeing that it will provide value to you. And then we move you on into, a paid type level. Now, does this mean we're replacing sales and marketing? Absolutely not. But it does mean there's a stronger focus on driving sales and marketing and the acquisition process through the product versus just through sales and marketing type activities. So if we look at, product-led growth, here's some of the things that are really key principles around it. One is fast time to value. None of us want to start using a product and taking days and days before we start to see the value of it. So we want to make sure our customers recognize that value early on. We want them to onboard themselves and be able to start using the product with minimal friction. And I'm sure some of us have experienced where we start using a product and we're still onboarding and they can totally confuse us in the process. Well, we don't want that to happen. We want to make sure that this is very low friction. Thinking ahead about where are those expansion paths. So it's not just about let me get you to start using the product, but how can I continue to add new value to you or to your organization? And to the extent that we can, we want to add some virality to it. So where, because you're really enjoying the value of the product, you can refer others in the process. And so we talk about this, this loop here that is, it starts with the acquisition. So it starts with the acquisition based upon typically a free type access. And you might have even been invited by someone because of the referral loop associated to it. Making sure that you activate or you reach the value, an aha moment very quickly. Then making sure that you continue to get value from the product and that you don't all of a sudden reach a point that says, I'm not finding value in this anymore, and you're ready to quit using it. And I will, say right now, I've had a product that I've used for almost 2 years. And I really felt like here in the last 3 to 6 months, I'm not getting the value that I really thought. I'm not getting what I was expecting from it. And so my subscription is supposed to renew this here in another week. And I've
And it's
canceled it
not.
because, they haven't found a way to deliver the value that I wanted. I got initial value, but there's not a continual value associated with that.
Yeah, and thanks, Tom, for sharing that. I just want to add here because you mentioned apps, downloads, renewal software. PLG is not just for software and those types of companies. It applies to all products and industries. So just
Mhm.
keep in mind this is not just software, it is inclusive.
Yeah, and many of the things we'll be talking about do have a strong software focus to it, Or even if your product is not software, how can you use software as an enabling feature to help drive this? And so, one of the examples that come to my mind, really quickly, would be the Dollar Shave Club. And I don't know, if any of you use the Dollar Shave Club, but they start off with, either free or very inexpensive type offers. They make it easy for you to sign up for their subscription model. So now you can start to get, the razors that you need to have. And they allow opportunities for expansion because now they offer different products. Once experience it, now you can go back and offer some of their other products that might be relevant to you. And of course, they want you to be excited and refer it to other people. And so they're using that loop, and it is not a software product. And so,
Well,
yes, we definitely want to keep this in mind as we think through that.
yeah, the other thing that
Um,
comes to
you know,
mind is the prescriptions too now.
Oh, yes. Well, and that's a really good point is, my pharmacy that I use, send in reminders. It's time to refill.
Hmm.
Send in reminders. Oh, we make it really easy for you to move your prescription from where you are to us. And so,
Yep.
being able to go and do my renewal of a prescription through an app or online, all of that, if you think about that, is reducing that friction. So, we
Mhm.
definitely want to do that. Expansion. So moving on into either upgrading you to higher level plans, introducing new features and capabilities to you or other products that you find useful. Or if you're part of a business to business world, how do you invite others in your organization to be a part of that? And then, of course, having ways to do referral. Now, the very first product that I remember that had a built in referral loop was Hotmail. And I don't know how many of you still have a Hotmail account because I do see it every once in a while. But Hotmail back in the late 1990s, when they were launched, had automatically added a link at the bottom of the page that said, add, join Hotmail, get your free Hotmail account. So anyone that, if you had a Hotmail account, any email that you sent was automatically referring others to the product. And so they build that virality into it from the very start. And there, Paul, having that Hotmail account. Excellent. Well, here it is, 2025. And if I go back into, 2019, 2020, product-led growth was being talked about a lot. And I'm going to say I don't see it talked about as much, but does that mean it's not relevant? Absolutely not. It is highly relevant. I'm going to show you some statistics around that. But one of the things to keep in mind is more and more we as users of product are really expecting that self-service experience. We want to be able to avoid any friction in starting to use a new product. We want to be able to see that value very, very quickly. And sometimes we talk about this as being the commoditization of IT. And if I'm going to show you some statistics that show if you are a software as a service company, the majority of software as a service companies are using product led growth as their model for acquisition. So if you look back at 2020 or 2020, at that time, somewhere about 20%, 27% of SaaS companies reported product led growth as fundamental to their strategy. Come forward now to 2025, and you see 58% of companies have adopted a PLG model. And of those 58%, over 90% of those are saying we are going to continue to increase our investment in product led growth. So we want to get a sense here of where you are relative to product led growth. So, Kim, if you would go ahead and launch that very first poll. So, we do have the first poll up. We want to get a sense of where you are in your product led journey. So, you're not considering it yet. You're starting to explore the concepts with the high possibility of moving ahead on that. You're in the early stages. You're already scaling it. or you're very mature in terms of your product-led growth delivery and the capabilities.
And there's
We're getting
no
some good. Go,
right
go, go
and
ahead.
wrong.
Sorry.
There's no wrong or right answer,
That's
right?
right.
So
Yeah.
don't be shy. This is how we all learn, and this is why Tom put this together so that we can all learn, expand, and grow as your partner.
All right. We got a really good response here. So I'm going to go ahead and end that poll and share the results. And we really see here that out of you, those of you that are attending here today, that most of you are in that very early stages of adopting product-led growth. So thank you for attending and sharing that with us. So let's go ahead and go into our very first trend. And as I said, this should not be any surprise to any of us, but using AI as part of, personalizing the experience. Now, yes, companies have personalized the experience to some extent without AI because we can build rules into our into our products to help guide that product-led growth, but it's not really quite as adaptive as being able to use AI. So let's just look at some of the ways that we can use AI. So, first, the onboarding flow. By understanding the persona, the specific needs, maybe some of the specific backgrounds around them, we can adapt the onboarding flow so that it's more personalized and it's less friction as we go through that onboarding process. Imagine as we go through, we get feature recommendations. So as we start to use the product, the AI recognizes how we're using the product and it starts to recommend features. Think about this as like, Netflix or Spotify based upon your usage and what you're watching or listening to. We're recommending, here's what you need to watch or here's what you should listen to. But instead of being music or movies, it's really about here's new features that you might find useful. Or let's put it in a different way. Imagine that you've used a product and you've never known that it has a certain capability to it. Wouldn't it have been nice to have that feature recommended to you based upon how they observe your needs and usage of that product? Or let's look at the alternative is you get features recommended to you because that's what the company decided. We want to push this feature right now. Or you've been using our product for 15 days. Now it's time to introduce this feature to you. That at some points becomes a little bit irritating. And so imagine having that much more personalized based upon AI. Retention triggers. And of course, we can go and already use, rules to identify somebody who's at risk. But imagine that AI can even start to predict based upon your usage, before you start getting too far into that retention challenge. And so anticipating that retention challenge much more before you actually even get there. And then, of course, predictive insights for upselling. That's kind of like the feature recommendation too, but delivering that timing right at the right point and time versus just ad hoc. Here's a rule. Let's go ahead and propose this upsell opportunity.
Well, the other thing that comes to mind, Tom, what you're saying is definitely the personalization, right? Making
Mm-hmm.
someone feel as if, wow, this was coded or built for my specific needs because it's being smart in the way of based on my use case, this is what I'm getting. It feels
Yep.
tailored.
Absolutely. Yes. Well, to be able to implement AI, there's some foundational features that we need to have in place. And in reality, these things that I'm going to talk about are foundational just to product-led growth in general. But you're going to want to have these mature and well founded in the work that you do. And so the telemetry or the data collection, collecting data on how the product is being used, how much time it takes you to do things, understanding the personas. And yes, I can define personas up front, but AI may help you identify even unique personas that you didn't necessarily consider from the very beginning. Identifying those signals of intent. And yes, we can do data analysis and start to identify what we believe, but AI is going to be much more adaptive in the way that it is identifying those. But then we also have to have some output capabilities in our apps. And so having those prompts, so prompts that come up and say, it looks like you're struggling here. Maybe you need a little help right now. Or now that we've seen how you're using it, this would be a really useful feature or capability that you haven't used yet, and that we can start pointing you into the right direction. Or to trigger a campaign. Now, this is where, I think it's very useful is that, yes, we have ways of triggering campaigns, but often they're based upon a certain set of rules. It's now time to send Tom a reminder that this new capability is here, or maybe to, do this versus making it relevant to where I am in that journey. And the research shows that only about 7% of product led growth companies are really using a high level of automation. And so you can start to see there's a great opportunity to better leverage AI and other forms of automation to drive the product led growth. So let's talk first here about discovery. And this is, remember, where the user is first interacting with your product. And it's really where AI can make one of the biggest impacts on that time to value. So if you think about the traditional way of implementing AI, there is a bunch of checklists, maybe a little bit of tailoredness to them, but it may have felt like it wasn't necessarily relevant, or that it was asking questions or asking you to do things that didn't feel relevant to you. And so when it doesn't feel relevant to you, that's where it starts to create friction. And so one of the things that AI can do is by tailoring that onboarding experience, whether it's through, a better understanding of who you are as a user, tailoring tutorials that are really relevant to you, creating these personalized pathways. All of these are things that are going to help you achieve that aha moment faster. And so we can start to see where AI can provide a lot of value in helping us achieve those aha moments faster. Well, how about feature recommendations? I think I talked about this already a little bit, where I
Mhm.
feel like so often, I get feature recommendations that are really just kind of this, the timing of the algorithm says, send it to, Tom right now. And it may not feel relevant to me. It may feel like it's just, almost like spam, if you want to think about it in that way. And so, how can we use AI? Well, one is we can look at cross platform behavior. So, I know for some apps that I use, and I'll use online banking specific, or banking for specifically. There are certain things that I feel comfortable doing in my app. There are other things where maybe I need a bigger picture and I want to do that with my computer. Maybe I have some preferences one way or the other in terms of what I'm doing. But AI can definitely start to recognize what your behaviors are and then be able to start making recommendations. You don't do this in your app. Why don't you try this? Because actually it's pretty easy, and encouraging me to do an experience. Or I go to the online experience sometimes because I think I can't do it in the app. And so letting me recognize you can do this in the app also. And so all of that, if you start thinking about it, helps improve the usage, helps improve the engagement, and leading into greater retention because I'm starting to get better value from that experience. The other is going to be that dynamic segmentation. Okay. And I've already kind of talked about this. Is think about this around what Amazon or Netflix or Spotify do. Is they don't have a bunch of rules in place that say Tom, you just bought air filters from us, and you bought air filters and water filters for your refrigerator. Here's what you should buy next. No, they're looking at a history, and all of those have a tremendous history in place that they say, we know other people that are just like you, and this is what they typically bought. And so their recommendations that are much more relevant, and they'll be the same with features, is, instead of having a static segmentation, it's really more of a dynamic segmentation. And almost, I think sometimes we talk about this as micro segmentation. Well, with AI, we can actually achieve that level of micro segmentation. So instead of giving you a generic experience or generic recommendations, it's really going to recommend to you those things that are the most relevant to you at that moment based upon who you are and how you're using the product.
Yeah, I think there too, Tom, is that it's small steps, right? Because that's a lot, right?
It
You're not
is,
gonna
uh-huh.
we're not gonna run and sprint a marathon if we're not there. And that's the important thing is think of small experiments. Tom, you talked about segmentation, micro segmentation. Depending on where you're at, we'll start with the segmentation or start
Hmm.
with something small to test things. And to your point, then get data.
Yep, exactly. And that goes back to, that importance of having that data collection capability in place is the better I can implement the data collection, the more I'm going to have the right data and that I can experiment and learn, from that.
Hmm.
So retention. So thinking about this in terms of, being a little more proactive. Yes, almost every app that I've used has some level of rules in place to say, hey, this would be a nice time to, use your product. Or I mentioned the one that I'm not going to renew. Well, it's given me these signals as like, hey, you haven't used this in a few days, start using it. And I'm having kind of fun just watching how it's responded to me, not using it. But, think about how much that might actually be more effective using AI, where I can start to identify those churn signals much earlier. That instead of waiting until I'm already in that decision mode of I'm going to stop using it, you can actually predict ahead of time and see those early warning signals that perhaps at that point being more proactive is going to retain me versus I've already made the decision and there's not really a lot that you can do to keep me now.
How many times do you go to cancel a service and you get, wait, there's this offer.
Exactly. Yeah. Yeah, exactly. Oh, hey, we have this offer for you.
Oh, now you have
Okay.
a discount.
Yeah, exactly. All right. And then identifying those opportunities for upsell. And so looking at, when you are ready, not just assuming you've been using our product for 6 months now, it's time to do an upsell, but really looking at the data that is about you. And one of the things that AI can also help you do is not only use the data that is in this system, but do data enrichment by looking at other data from other platforms. So, such as LinkedIn, I'm just using that as an example. I don't want to limit it to that, but looking at other types of platforms that have different types of data on you and using that as a way to make better recommendations to you. Identifying the right moment in time to nudge you or to nudge other stakeholders in the organization to use your product or start using features of your product. And so the important thing here is that AI is going to make these recommendations come at the right time and with the right level of relevance, not just set and based upon what I want to say, a static set of rules that the vendor organization decided to use. Well, let's look at a couple of case studies here. And so one is with Notion. And so, uh, if you're not familiar with Notion, it really helps you better interact with the data that you already have in your systems, be able to leverage that data to make better decisions, or as you're writing and creating content, be able to guide you in creating that content. And you're going to see this theme come up here in another moment, but be able to provide, they're able to go and see how you're using things, or as you're getting started, you might be rephrasing a request and it might give you a better suggestion in terms of how to, phrase that request. Or if you are, working on something, it has some templates already in place and say, here's a great template for you to be able to use. Some of you might be using Grammarly. And so, sorry, got to move to my next slide here. So, using Grammarly, and it doesn't go and try to make you use all the capabilities. Matter of fact, it gives you some capabilities free at the beginning. So you start to get some of that immediate value, but then determining when is the right time to have you upgrade to where let's work on some of your more grammatical type capabilities versus just correcting the word spelling, or maybe we can help you adjust and refine your tone of voice. And so, instead of it feeling like a sales push, it really better aligns to where you are within the usage of the product and recognizing where you can better leverage that. Now, I will say both with Notion and Grammarly, the foundation of the product is AI based. And so, but you don't have to be AI based like Grammarly and Notion to be able to start implementing these types of principles. But here's the
Mhm.
thing to remember is, we have to have that product telemetry or that data collection capability in place to be able to start leveraging AI. And Cynthia mentioned this already. Don't try to bite it off all at once. You probably are going to get the best upfront value by focusing on the onboarding, because if I'm not getting it onboarded, I can't even think about retention yet. And then
Mhm.
I might want to look next at retention, because if I'm having retention issues, it doesn't do me any good to go and scale my customer acquisition. Let's plug some of those retention holes. And then we start looking at the expansion. And, as with any use of AI, don't just use AI blindly, because AI will make mistakes. And you want to make sure that you balance that with, good human oversight.
Yeah, the strategy is also key, right? The strategy is going
Yeah.
to come from us humans and the personalization of evaluating and then thinking through on the strategy with next steps.
Okay. Let's go ahead and let's do another poll here. I know I've been talking a lot. So let's do another poll. And Kim, if you would go ahead and launch that. But what's the biggest challenge holding back PLG success in your organization? And the first one is just culturally, is if I'm going to do product led growth, I have to get buy-in around the organization to be able to do that. Number four, sales friction is maybe a little bit of cultural alignment. But if you think about, we have traditionally had a sales team selling our product. And now we're going to say, we're going to take a little bit of that away from you and letting the product start selling yourself. You're probably going to get a little bit of friction from that. Perhaps you don't have the right level of user experience in place, because the user experience to do product led growth is one of the most important aspects of that. And the last one I have there is market readiness. And so, as you're looking at the market, is it ready for product? Is it ready to do self service? Is it ready to do its
Mm.
own onboarding? And I was talking recently here with a person who's doing a startup company. And because it's a new need in the marketplace, it's a new area, I'm not sure the market is completely ready for product led growth. And I think they still need to better understand some of their sales model and some of their, what I want to say, the go to market strategy about that before they're fully ready to start implementing product led growth. But I think they're in a market area where that's going to make sense for them to be able to win in the marketplace, to add product-led growth capabilities. Well, we got good responses here, so let's look at our results here. And the top response there was cultural alignment. And that I definitely understand, because got to get the culture in place, got to get everybody aligned that this is the right thing to do. Because it's going to take your executives, your sales and marketing, maybe even your finance group, to be able to align around it. Product development, we got to get product development aligned to this to make product-led growth work. And then the second one was analytics and tooling. And so that is definitely an important one. So thank you for sharing that.
Does anything
Well,
come
let's
to
look.
mind?
Oh, go
Does
ahead.
anything, I was going to ask you, Tom, does anything come to mind on how, what is your tip on the first step, perhaps, on getting over that curve on cultural alignment?
Yeah, I would say if you don't have the data collection in place, perhaps maybe even data collection would be the first one of the first starting points, just to
Mhm.
be able to start demonstrating what you're seeing in the data. And then from that, this goes back to a comment you made earlier around experimentation. Try to identify some experimentation. Maybe there's a certain part of your market segment, or maybe there's a certain product you're launching to the market that says, here is an opportunity for us to experiment with product-led growth. Maybe we keep some traditional onboarding in place and some product-led growth, and we start to
Yeah.
see what that adoption looks like. And I think ultimately, when people start to see that the product-led growth reduces the cost of customer acquisition, reduces the cost of onboarding, and you can start demonstrating that, you're going to go and get that better, get better alignment around that. And this is like maybe a startup type world within a existing company, of where you almost need to separate out into your
Think
separate part of an
differently.
organization and say, we're going to have this team here focused totally on it. So, don't try to bite it all off at once, but try to think of how you can do things in a small way.
Yeah. So I heard this. I heard data and small experiment.
Hmm.
Yep.
Yep.
Thank you.
All right. Well, let's get into the second one around community led growth. And so, what this really is about is, how do you get more engagement across the community, where they're sharing content and supporting each other? And how do you, put feedback loops in place so that you, create that stronger sense of loyalty with your companies or with your customers? And so here's just four examples. We already talked about Notion and one of the examples, but you see a couple of themes coming across here. One is template galleries, where users can create templates and be able to share them for others to use. If you just start thinking about that, when I start using a product, sometimes I am looking for, here would be a template that would be really nice. And if I can find that template, that makes me, much more loyal and satisfied with the product experience than if I am totally having to create things from scratch all the on my own. You see with Figma, where they allow the community to create plugins, and that, particular for them with that collaborative design, be able to say, oh, here's already a design that I can just take and plug in, versus having to create it from scratch. Yeah, Figma makes it easier to do that, but having it already existing, that makes the product more valuable and creates a higher level of engagement. So you kind of see those two themes coming across real strongly. Having feedback loops. And yes, companies have had feedback loops in the products, for years, but really, emphasizing that more, making sure that as you get those feedback loops, that you're able to go and provide updates to people, letting them know that their voice was heard and that you are actually implementing some of the requests that are coming in. And so I think those are just, you can look through there and see some other things. But I think those are some of those key themes. And then I'm going to go down to lattice. If you can imagine, you are in a smaller organization where you have a small HR team or you're the only HR person. Imagine how valuable having a Slack community would be, or community events where you can start to learn from other people, what is that going to do for you? That's going to make you feel, more loyal to the company because it's helping you use the product better and helping you do your job better. So these are just some of those key themes here around building that community.
The
So
other
I'm
thing
going to
that
jump
comes
back.
to
Jonathan
mind,
just put a comment there that said, we started with the approach of reducing onboarding cost, okay, rather than for acquisition. Yeah, that's something that if you think about really helps sell the value in your company. Let's just, reduce these costs. And there's certain products that based upon their price, you almost have to start boarding, moving into a self onboarding and self usage type approach because otherwise you're losing a year, of profit already just by some of that upfront investment that you need to do.
something I was going to say, Tom, was
Oh,
also on
yep.
the community-based component is if someone's frustrated with something that they can't figure out or master, and having the community, there's usually someone that's already been through it and you can easily
Mm-hmm.
find the answer. So one, it's the knowledge and it provides a retention component there rather than like, I'm so frustrated, that's it, I'm out, right?
Yep,
There is
exactly.
there is that community. It's like, I know the fix for that.
Yep. And you want to find a balance there because I've also feel like I've seen some companies that have completely moved into a community support model and
Mhm.
you would were you not what do I want to say here where only the answers for questions are only coming from the community and it's almost like they're not engaged, the vendor themselves aren't engaged in any of the customer support, and that actually creates a frustration to me because it almost feels like what do they care? And so I think you need to
Yeah.
find that balance is that you have your support team helping respond it, but there are things that your support team are not going to have experienced. And so that's where the community comes in uh, and adds value. So there's a
Lauren, I have a
question there. What
really,
can you
yeah.
suggest for boosting the community use? And here is the thing is if you look at community management, and that community management is something that has been around for a while, it doesn't automatically happen. It takes somebody in your organization, you know, highly focused, if not dedicated, to help and manage the community. And so some of the things that you might do is to do some promotions to find those seed ambassadors, you know, to become the first ones to help drive that engagement. Look at your
Mhm.
customer data and the data from your product and find out who's really using the product, who is using the product in ways that we hadn't really thought about, and reaching out to them to see if they can become some of your ambassadors, for the program. Give them some special, rewards for being engaged like that. But it takes getting a few people. And I think if you look at any community out there, you probably only have 2 or 3% of the community that is really driving the engagement. And that's okay. But it's going to take work from your side to make that happen. It may also be where you have to put out questions or thoughts that help drive that engagement. So having somebody focused on that community management, I think, is an important aspect of that. And then we also talk about that, co-creation. If my product doesn't enable co-creation, then it's going to be hard for it to be successful. So if you look at what Figma has done, that has definitely been a key part of their overall growth strategy. Salesforce started off as an application, has turned into a platform, and it's not so much the community, but you see a lot of other vendors who are saying, hey, here's some things that Salesforce isn't doing. But because I can embed new capabilities and plugins into Salesforce, we are opening up new potential for the usage of the product. And I think this goes back to the question you asked, Laura, is, recognize and reward those advocates. So make sure that people become advocates partly because there's some self-actualization there, but also because being publicly acknowledged for your expertise is something that they value. and rewarding them for that and recognizing them for that is going to be part of what helps drive that. All right, we're going to pause for a quick commercial. I'll let you take this, Cynthia.
Okay, thanks, Tom. So one of the things that we are constantly doing is one, we like to serve in person, and specifically Tom. He loves training in person, and he is going to be in London in just a few, actually next week, right? He's going to be in
It is
London.
next week. Yeah. So it's a, short notice on that one. But if
Yeah.
you happen to be in that area or know somebody in that area, reach out to them. But we have others coming up. So
Yes, and this course is the Optimal Product Management course, which is our foundation course that also includes the certification exam for Certified Product Manager through our partner AI-PMM. That's why you have that QR code if you're interested. You can go ahead and sign up. But we do have one in New York also next month, and we have several more planned. I think Tom's going to be doing one again in December in Austin.
in
So,
Austin. Yeah. So
yep.
everyone loves coming to Austin. So that's a great one too. All right. Well, let's get into the third trend. And this is really about thinking about embedding it from the very beginning. Now, I'm not going to say you can't go and retrofit your product, but we're going to talk about some of those challenges of doing that. And so, not just thinking about product led growth as a go to market tactic, but thinking about it as your philosophy from the very beginning, or maybe even as an organizational philosophy from the very beginning. And so that means let's embed product led growth from the beginning, as we're building out that MVP, thinking about how can we build in from the very beginning the self-service capabilities. How do you build in virality? How do you build in that user empowerment that we talked about with creating a community and having templates and engaging the community? Those are all things that if you haven't planned in from the beginning, it's a little bit of a challenge to come back and retrofit that. So let's just talk about that a little bit. So, if I haven't planned that from the beginning, retrofitting back in product led growth can create an inconsistent user experience. There's a lot of, tech debt and design debt that's you're going to have to catch up on and take care of. You may, and I think, this came up in one of the questions there, you may have that cultural friction in place because sales teams are used to this is the way that we do things. Now you're taking some of our sales incentives away from us by letting the product, sell itself. And of course, the tooling gap. So if you haven't thought about product-led growth from the beginning, it takes some work to put that analytics capability in place and then making sure that you're tracking the right types of information to be able to see that time to value, to be able to identify what we call product qualified leads. And I'm going to talk about that here in just a moment. So if you look at 2025, the strategies for growth with product led, well, the first two we've really already talked about. So I don't need to talk any more on that. But another one here is outcome based pricing. So instead of just charging for, here's a monthly subscription fee, actually think about how do I go and charge based upon outcomes? And so, for example, I saw, I was reading about one where we get some identity validation. Well, instead of charging them for every query or charging them a flat fee, per month, what if I actually only charge them when I get an identity validation back to them, when they're actually realizing the value? Or if I'm doing fraud detection, I only charge them when we actually block a fraud versus charging them along the way. And those are just a couple examples of outcome-based type pricing, but connecting it back into you're only going to get charged when you actually see the recognized value. Not all products are going to align themselves to that, but it's definitely something to be thinking about because it's going to break down those barriers to selling your product. And then the last one is what we've been talking about is yes, product led growth is great, but not everybody is going to do or only do product led growth. And so you see companies like HubSpot that started off with a traditional sales model. They did embedded product led growth. But even within there, they reach a point of where they reach what is called a product qualified lead. That means we're seeing enough usage of our product by a person or by several people in the organization where we want to turn that into an enterprise sale. And
Mm-hmm.
so, enterprise sales, I don't know that for some products, you're never going to want to do that totally self-service, um, because they need some hand holding. There's some customization and configuration that needs to be done. Even the pricing model may be unique, so it may not lend itself, but you can get started with product led growth. And now this is part of the sales for the sales team is sales. You're not getting just any leads. You're getting leads that we have shown have that potential for closing. And they're going to get excited because they're going to see those close rates, improve.
Increase.
Yeah. And there's a
Yeah,
lot
that's
of,
the.
and there's a lot of products that have implemented hybrid from the very beginning. So,
Mhm.
but if you're already in a standard sales model, yes, you can come back and start implementing a hybrid type model. All
Mhm.
right. Well, I tell you what, we have just a few minutes. Oh, I got one more slide here. So, these are the key principles when we think about product led design. One is that time to value. And the longer it takes somebody to start to onboard, to get to be onboarded, and to start to see that initial value, boy, you're going to go and reduce the likelihood of successfully driving that through a product led growth model. So, reducing that friction as much as possible. If you want to leverage this collaborative type environment, how can you build that in from the very beginning? How can you make it easy for somebody to share your product with somebody else as part of their regular usage versus them having to, uh, you know, take extra steps to be able to do that? And of course, having tiered access from the beginning, whether it's free, as in freemium, for free forever, we call freemium, or whether it's a free trial that moves on, having those uh, levels of models all built in place from the very beginning. So
Yeah.
let's do one last poll, and then we can do any additional Q&A that comes up. But based upon what you've heard today, what action do you feel like you're most likely to take in your organization? And I know many of you are even looking at even starting to use it.
Mhm.
So, what are some ways that you might, what are some steps here that you've heard today that you might think about taking advantage of and implementing? I'm seeing on the improve analytics and operations, that's really talking about getting the basic infrastructure in place to be able to track data, to be able to use the data, to be able to leverage the data. And I'm not trying to influence any of the decisions there, but that one is the one that is coming up by most people
Yeah.
is improving the analytics and operations. So let's go ahead and I'm going to close the poll here. We've got a good response, and you can start to see that that is the biggest one right there is improving analytics and operations. And that's almost 70% of you
Mhm.
responded with that. But you do start to see leveraging the AI automation and embedding product led growth earlier coming up there also. So thank you all for sharing that. We got just a couple of more slides that
Announcements.
Cynthia's going to present to you. And then
Yes.
we'll have maybe another minute here for any other questions that come up.
Yes, and we like to continue being community based in the way that we invite you all to come to our next webinar, where Dean and Kenny from our team are going to talk about predictive analytics for product managers in 2025 and beyond. So it is a good time to start thinking of this because many times this is the time to start thinking annual planning, or maybe you're already in it. So definitely join this webinar, get ahead of the pack on that. And then
And it really
lastly,
relates to this topic of implementing AI that we've been talking about.
yes, and Dean is he's going to have some good stuff. I can tell you that.
Yep.
Lastly, we also have our upcoming courses as we do have them. We've talked about the ones in London and in New York, but we also have live online courses. So, during the times where you cannot travel, don't worry, we come to your computer screen live online like we did now, and it's very informative. And of course, it does lead towards the certification. So you can check those out. And now I want to say thank you for everyone and definitely want to invite those questions that you may have. In the meantime, I know what I heard is how to get started was one is the data, right? And then small experiments and showing some wins probably to
Hmm.
get that cultural change coming about.
Yep.
Yeah. And it's not just okay, create and collect the data, but you got to look at it and figure out the next steps on that strategy.
All right. Any questions that are out there? If you have any, go ahead and post those.
And it's all right if you don't have questions right now. You can connect with us on LinkedIn. You can ask questions there as well to each of us or join our LinkedIn community and post things there.
Yep. One of the things this didn't come up as a question here from the group, but one of the questions that I've often hear is product-led growth suitable for everybody? And no, it's not going to be suitable. I see a lot of products that are truly only valuable when you can roll it out across the enterprise. And so those are ones that may have to still go through the traditional buying process. But what I always say to those types of companies is once you get the initial sale in place, are there some ways that you can go and implement product led growth in terms of adoption and new features, capabilities within the product? How can you move them through upgrade paths using some of the product led type concepts? Or are there some new opportunities that you're exploring where you can go and do some initial product led growth? And so, yes, there are definitely products this isn't going to make sense for, but it's something to always keep in your mind to be thinking about, the future.
Did you get that question, Tom? Sorry.
All right. Well, we're a couple minutes past. So
Yep.
I would say, unless we have any, there is one
There
question
is
that
one.
came
There
in
is
here.
one. Yeah.
Suggestions on balancing too much onboarding and not enough. So this is where you need to do some analysis and working with your team. But uh, think about it this way is what is the essential information you need to get them to the first level of value and keep it to a minimum. And then once they start to see that initial value, maybe there's additional onboarding information that you need to be able to get from them to open up additional features and capabilities. So, instead of saying, I need all of this information for onboarding, what's the minimum that I need to be able to get from them? And then the second thing is if, and I'll use an example that comes from insurance industry. And I remember somebody who actually worked for an insurance company who said this is that they wanted to enroll in a new insurance plan, often by their own company. And it asked them all of these questions that the company already had in their databases. And so if you're working with a current, relationship, if you already have a data, don't make them enter it.
Yeah.
Pull that data right in because that's going to help reduce some of that friction. And so, yeah, think about what's that minimal that I need to have just to let them start using my product. And then I can start to do a progressive onboarding as they start to get to additional capabilities that they might want to use. So great question. Thank you for asking that.
Yeah. Also the feedback on that and going from there.
All righty.
I think that's
Well, I
it,
think
everyone.
we're already over. So let's go ahead and wrap up here. So thank you for everyone. And thank you for the questions and thoughts that you shared as we went through this.
Bye, everyone. See you at the next webinar.
All right. Bye.